Hello, my name is Tzoulias, and today I'm going to present you my paper on assessing customer satisfaction in the Greek 3PL market. Let's go over a presentation of contents first. We begin by issuing the problem statement, followed up by the systematic literature review, which is then followed up by the thematic analysis. We then employ a multi-criteria analysis, and we get our results and our concluding remarks. Moving on, let's see the problem boundaries first. The 3PL providers are studied from the perspective of the customer. The data that will be studied, that will be done using a multi-criteria analysis method that counts the satisfaction of the customer. And for that, we will be using three different tiers of criteria: Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. In this slide, we can see the entire model that we formed. We see the distinct tiers. We see the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 criteria. We see that the Tier 1 criteria is the basis of our model, and then those are connected to the Tier 2, and the Tier 2 criteria are in turn connected to the Tier 3 criteria. Moving on, let's see how the Tier 1 criteria were formed. First of all, the Tier 1 criteria come from the ServQual model, which is a research instrument designed by Parasuraman in order to encapsulate the consumer's perception and expectations of a service. It consists of 5 distinct dimensions, namely empathy, tangibles, assurance, responsiveness, and reliability. Those will be our Tier 1 criteria, and last but not least, here we add cost as the last Tier 1 criterion, because as we will see later, it is really important to the research. Moving on, we have the Tier 2 criteria. Those were identified by the thematic analysis that was conducted by the author. Those were compatibility, support, the catchment area of the 3PL provider, the assets that they have, their services, their reliability and flexibility, their stability, the management personnel, the expertise in certain areas, their credibility and reputation, and others. Now let's see how those were identified. First of all, we found some criteria in the thematic analysis, for example, track record, relationships, and history in 3 different research papers. Those are all quite similar, so in order to make counting them easier, we assigned those into a keyword, in this particular case, in the reputation keyword. We then performed a keyword density analysis, and we came up with our Tier 2 criteria. Moving on, for our last tier of criteria, the Tier 3 criteria were selected by the author and were used to construct the questionnaire. As we see, they are all interconnected, and finally the Tier 3 criteria is what we present to the surveys in order to surveys. Now, we could not arbitrarily connect all those tiers of criteria, so let's see how that was done. For example, we have our Tier 1 criterion of tangibles that is connected to the Tier 2 criterion of services, because Parasuraman says that tangibles can also be a part of the representations of services, such as the speed and efficiency of the performed services. This in turn is connected to the number of different services provided, because again Parasuraman says that tangibles do not have to be strictly physical, but rather one-dimensional and easily observed by the customer. Again, let's see an overview of the entire problem. We have the Tier 1 criteria, the Tier 2 criteria, and the Tier 3 criteria, which are interconnected in order to form the conceptual model of the problem, which is then forwarded to the 3PL customer, which are our surveys. We then deploy the MUSA method, and we come up with the MUSA results. Now let's see how we processed the survey answers. First of all, those were aggregated in Excel and then analyzed using the MUSA method, as we said, that was created by Grigoroulis and Siskos. Why did we pick this method? Because it's heavily invested in studying the data from the perspective of the customer satisfaction. It is highly regarded in the scientific world, while also presenting low computational requirements. The data that we get from that will be satisfaction and weight ratings for all criteria and sub-criteria, and also action and improvement diagrams that can be used to identify market trends and improvement opportunities as well. The profile of the survey was aimed toward businesses that had a contract with the 3PL provider. Over 6,700 businesses were contacted through various forms. mostly through email due to the COVID pandemic. We had a 1.5% response rate from May 2020 to the September of the same year, and we asked those surveys how satisfied they were by their 3PL providers regarding the were identified as Tier 3. Now let's see. We see that most of the respondents are employed in the trade and agricultural sector businesses. In this slide, we can see the added value satisfaction curve. This form indicates that according to Grigoroulis and Siskos, that 3PL customers are quite demanding. Now for the criteria weights and their satisfaction, we see that tangibles and assurance are the most important criteria to the customers. And concerning their satisfaction, most of them are pretty well satisfied with tangibles and reliability being the most satisfied out of all. Now we talked a little bit before about the action and improvement diagrams, but let's see how those play out. First of all, we have the action diagram, which links the importance of a given criterion to the performance of the general 3PL market concerning this criterion. On the bottom left, we have our status quo area. On the bottom right, we have our action opportunities area. On the top left, we have the transfer resources area. And on the top right, we have our leverage opportunities. The improvement diagram, on the other hand, links the effectiveness of the improvement efforts for a certain criteria to how demanding the customers are concerning this criterion. It has three different priorities of improvement. We see on the bottom left and top right, we have our second priority of improvement. On the top left, we have our last priority of improvement. And on the bottom right, we have our first priority of improvement. Now let's see how those action and improvement diagrams play out in the criterion of cost. We see that value for money was identified as a clear leverage opportunity with high importance to the customers, but also pretty well performed by the general 3PL market. On the other hand, long-term time and money saved, as well as short-term time and money saved, are at the status quo position, meaning that they should generally be left as is. Now, considering the improvement diagram, we see the long-term money and time saved, as well as short-term time saved, is the last priority of improvement target, while short-term money saved is a second priority of improvement target. And again, we see value for money is a clear winner here. We see it has a really high improvement effectiveness, and is a first priority target. So after we've done with all that, we ranked all the criteria according to their action and improvement diagrams ratings. We see here we have, for example, the S-rated criteria, which were the most important to the customers. They present an action or leverage opportunity in the action diagram and also listed as a first priority in the respective criteria improvement diagrams. The A-rated criteria, those present either an action opportunity and second priority of importance in the action improvement diagrams, or a leverage opportunity and the first priority of importance. So in the same manner, we came up with a B, C, and D rated criteria in order to make counting them easier. Let's see some important dimensions. As the customer said, first of all, the range of services criterion is ranked as an S-, so it's really important to the customers. It can be improved by customs brokering, freight auditing, shipment tracking, or reverse chain logistics. Also, information systems are critical to the customers since they are also ranked as an S- criterion. Those can be improved by improving the already existing software and hardware, of course, acquiring new ERPs, structuring and organizing, and in many other ways. Value for money, again, we see that it is the most important criterion that was identified in this paper. It can be improved by investing in planning, especially to create the perception of value for money, by giving advance notice to the customers about how much they're supposed to pay, by including the value for money in the key objectives set to be met by the company, and in generally by trying to find the ideal mix between keeping the costs low while also providing value. Last but not least, we have the customer orientation criterion, which is a B-rated criterion. This can be improved by hiring customer-friendly staff, treating them well, having customer-focused training, and defining clear standards of service. Now, for our conclusions, we found out that small-scale companies place low importance on the 3PL providers' workforce knowledge. This is because they don't have very sophisticated needs. So this in turn means that the average 3PL provider does not feel the need to invest in sophisticated personnel, since most of their clients are small-scale companies. Uh, Also, the average 3PL customer places really high importance on the value for money aspect and also emphasizes on the short-term money saved. Because of that, the average 3PL customer and provider fails to take into account future and long-term needs, such as, for example, contingency planning, that they might not seem important in the short term, but as we've seen with the complete logistical failure of the Greek sector during the early pandemic days, it is really important to plan for those. But last but not least, the Greek logistics sector is performing pretty well in all critical areas such as their fleet, their customer orientation, the quality reliability, the response time, the workforce trustworthiness, and their value for money ratios. Thank you very much.